There are lies so dazzling they can make an entire room believe they are true love. They glitter like a 30-carat diamond on a woman's finger, reflecting light and concealing the darkness behind. But that night in Chicago, on the 103rd floor of a luxury restaurant overlooking Lake Michigan, there was one pair of eyes that saw differently. Not the eyes of a powerful billionaire, not of the elite in tailored suits, but of a young waitress quietly standing in the corner of the room. She saw the phone screen light up. She saw the messages no one was supposed to see. And she understood, in that very moment, she had to choose. To remain silent and continue living an invisible life, or to speak the truth and accept losing everything. She chose the truth. And that choice not only cost her job that very night, but the next morning it placed her in a far more dangerous game, beginning with a black box left at the door of her tiny apartment. A box that could change fate itself. Chicago at night always carries a different kind of temperament. That city doesn't just blaze with thousands of lights, it also hums like a silent symphony. From the surface of Lake Michigan, cold wind sweeps in and makes the skyscrapers tremble like giant instruments. People often say New York never sleeps, while Chicago never stops whispering. And that night, in the endless whisper of wind and waves, a story was waiting to be rewritten. A story only an invisible person would be brave enough to begin. On the 103rd floor of Willis Tower, the restaurant Echelon operated like a top-tier stage play. From the moment you stepped inside, the ordinary world vanished. The lighting wasn't too bright, just enough for silver metal, crystal, and leather to reflect into a gentle shimmer. The music wasn't invasive, just a few saxophone jazz phrases rising like Havana smoke. The fragrance wasn't overpowering, only a passing trace, like a whispered reminder that you were in a place where every detail had been measured precisely down to each second, each movement. For most people, this was a place to show off status. But for Lina Tron, a 24-year-old waitress, it was where she learned how to disappear. Every night when the clock struck 5, Lina left her tiny loft in Pilsen, where the rickety staircase creaked with every step, and took the train to the Loop. She changed into a black uniform, pinned her hair neatly, slipped on a pair of low heels worn down at the back, and put on her familiar role. A server who was not allowed to have a personality, not allowed to leave a trace. The job required her to be like a shadow, step in when guests needed, retreat before they had time to remember. For many, invisibility is a punishment. For Lina, it was a survival skill. Orphaned of her father at 12, her mother gone early to illness, hospital debts still piled on the table, Lina understood the price of silence. Her father left with a younger woman, taking the family's trust with him. The image of her mother sitting by the window, eyes vacant as she stared down into the dark courtyard, haunted Lina throughout her adolescence. From that, she learned there are truths that, if left unspoken, will kill an entire life. Yet ironically, her current life forced her to swallow the truth. At Echelon, her duty was to be silent, to observe without letting anyone realize she was observing. That very ability made Lina an excellent server. Just from the way a guest leaned slightly forward, she knew they were about to ask for the bill. From the faintest breath, she could guess the wine didn't suit their palate. Those tiny things nobody noticed were, to Lina, an entire language. She read them like reading an old painting where each crack, each layer of pigment, held the real story. And that evening, when Echelon's doors swung open, Lina's story began as well. The man who entered wasn't loud. No entourage, no flashes. But the instant he stepped in, the atmosphere of the restaurant changed. People didn't turn because of curiosity, but because they were drawn. It was Adrian Whitlock, 56, a man who held in his hands Chicago's vital infrastructures. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to flaunt. His very presence was power. Silver hair, calm gray eyes, a tailored navy suit hugging his frame. Everything said he didn't need to try to prove anything. He was the embodiment of old money, the kind of wealth that had sunk its roots into the city over generations. On his arm was Sloane Hart. Young, beautiful chestnut hair in soft waves, a deep blue dress flowing like Lake Michigan under moonlight. She laughed like crystal glasses touching, her fingers lightly tracing along Adrian's arm whenever she tilted her head to whisper. Every movement seemed programmed to make the man beside her feel loved, admired. And Adrian, in everyone's eyes, seemed to believe it completely. The diners in the restaurant looked at them like a perfect painting, a lonely billionaire finding new love, a modern fairy tale. But not Lina. This was the third time she had served them. The first time she only thought they looked well-matched. The second time she caught Sloane's eyes flick quickly across the room, colder than the smile on her lips. And the third time she had prepared herself to see something imperfect. When Lina set a Macallan 25 before Adrian and a Kir Royale before Sloane, the gold-cased iPhone on the table vibrated. Sloane glanced at it, a brief frown, then immediately smiled again so deftly that anyone would believe it was nothing more than a natural reaction. But Lina stood close, and from that angle, in that instant, the truth stepped into the light. On the screen appeared a selfie, Sloane on a yacht beside a dark-haired man with bright eyes and a half-smile full of possession. Too intimate, too private to be called brother, and right beneath it a message flashed like a knife. Has the old man mentioned the Miami transfer yet? Book Kauai. Don't forget the children's fun story. He'll buy it all. In an instant, the space around still blazed with lights. Jazz still lilted, cutlery still clinked softly. But for Lina, everything froze. The silver tray in her hands felt 10 times heavier, her throat parched, her heart pounding as if it would rip through her chest. This was no longer an illicit affair. This was a calculated con, a sophisticated play staged with lies and a counterfeit halo. She looked at Adrian. He was smiling, a rare gentleness in his eyes as Sloane tilted her head and smiled at him. An earnest smile without a ripple. In those eyes there was no suspicion, only trust. Sloane was turning into a weapon. A memory surged up in Lina's mind. Her mother, the night her father left, sitting by the window with a look of despair. Lina was only 12 then, helpless as the family's world shattered. And now, right before her eyes, that history was repeating, only on a colossal scale, where trust was being exploited not just to steal affection, but to steal tens of millions of dollars, perhaps even a man's honor. She heard 2 voices inside her. One reminded her, stay silent. Stay silent to keep your job, to survive, to pay your debts. If you speak, you'll lose everything. But another voice, deeper, steadier like an echo from her mother's eyes years ago, urged, speak. Because sometimes silence is crueler than a lie. Lina's hand trembled as she set the glasses down. Sloane stood, excusing herself to the powder room. Adrian lowered his head to sign the bill. This was the only chance. If she let it pass, she would make herself an accomplice. If she spoke, she might destroy herself. She drew a deep breath, felt the tray's icy metal, felt it quiver with each beat of her heart. She stepped closer to the table, bent slightly, her voice small but clear. Mr. Whitlock. Adrian looked up. His gray eyes were deep, still, like a lake at night without a ripple. A gaze neither angry nor tender, but like a mirror that forces one to be honest with oneself. Lena's throat tightened, but the words still broke free, shaking yet resolute. I'm sorry for overstepping. But that woman isn't who you think she is. I saw the phone. I didn't mean to, but the messages were right there. They talked about a transfer in Miami, about a fake children's fund, about disappearing after taking your money. I know I shouldn't say this, but if I stay silent, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Each word fell from her lips, like stones cast on a still lake, and the ripples began to spread. Adrian was motionless. He didn't frown, didn't snap, didn't smile. He only stayed quiet. Those eyes looked through Lena, as if to probe the truth behind her words. Then he put the pen down, finished signing, and pushed the leather folder toward her. Not a word, no sign of whether he believed her or not. In that moment, Lena didn't know whether she had saved a man or signed her own sentence. Sloane's heels clicked, each step a deathly rhythm. The perfect smile returned to her face, as if there had never been a crack. No one but Adrian and Lena knew a bomb had just been activated, a bomb that could explode right there. And when it did, the first person to feel the shock would not be Adrian, but Lena herself. The sound of high heels struck the polished wooden floor, each beat like a knife tapping against someone's palm. Sloane returned to the table, her deep blue dress swaying like lake waves under the lights. Her smile was still flawless, as if not a speck of dust could cling to that glossy surface. But in the fraction of a second when her eyes swept past Lena, that smile faltered just 1/10,000th of a second, a flash of sharp suspicion. She had sensed something was off. Is everything all right, darling? Sloane laid a hand on Adrian's shoulder, her voice sweet as honey, pitched just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. You look a little tense. Adrian tilted his head toward her, his eyes revealing nothing, only silence. He folded the bill, slid it into his inner pocket, then sat upright, calm as though nothing at all had happened. The stretch of silence was so long it made even Lena struggle to breathe. She wondered, had he believed her? Or was everything she'd said just a passing breeze to a man accustomed to power plays? Sloane turned her gaze toward Lena, her eyes glittering yet cold as blades. Her lips curved slightly. And the waitress, why are you still standing here? Hoping for a bigger tip? Her tone was airy, but underneath was sharp mockery, as if she intended to make Lena into the evening's joke. Heat rushed to Lena's face. Her hands gripped the silver tray so tightly, her knuckles went white. Every part of her wanted to retort, to shout that she needed none of their dirty money, but she held back. One word of defiance could become the excuse to destroy her instantly. The air was thickening when another voice cut in, low, harsh. What's going on here? Marco, the restaurant manager, appeared as if stepping out of the shadows. His face was rigid, his eyes darting swiftly between Adrian, Sloane, and Lena, as though in seconds he had grasped that something had gone off script in Echelon's perfect play. Marco was the kind of man who never allowed a wrinkle on a tablecloth, let alone a disruption at the VVIP table. Sloane seized the moment, a seasoned actress catching the spotlight. She turned to Marco, eyes shimmering as if on the verge of tears. This server has disturbed us. She intruded into our private matters, even slandered me in front of my fiancé. Can you imagine such a thing? The word fiancé dropped from her lips like a dagger aimed straight at Lena. Not just girlfriend, not just lover. Engaged? If true, it would render Lena's words unforgivable in the eyes of every onlooker. Marco froze, then his face darkened. His glare turned on Lena, burning with fury. Is this true? What did you just say to the guests? Lena opened her mouth, her throat parched. She wanted to explain, to say she had only done the right thing, that a scheme was unfolding before their eyes. But under Adrian's cold, silent gaze, the man who had said nothing from beginning to end, she knew any words now were worthless. His silence alone was enough for Marco to believe the blame lay with her. Lena began, but Marco cut her off, his voice booming loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Are you insane? This is Mr. Whitlock, the man who keeps this restaurant alive. And you dare invent insults? You have no job here anymore. Effective immediately, it was like being slapped across the face. Lena's ears rang. All around eyes turned toward her, curious, disdainful, pitying. She had become an unwanted sideshow, yet one everyone enjoyed gossiping about. Sloane tilted her head, resting lightly on Adrian's shoulder, lips curving in a victorious smile. When her eyes flicked past Lena, they glimmered with malice. Without a word, Lena understood. She had lost, at least for this moment. Marco seized her arm, his grip so tight it hurt. In my office. Now his voice left no room for resistance. As they crossed the dining room, Lena felt every whisper, every scrutinizing glance. Fellow servers avoided her eyes, turning away as if afraid to catch contagion from someone who had broken the unspoken rules. Every light, every chair, every piano note became the silent audience of her execution. The narrow manager's office door slammed shut behind them. Marco released her, then slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. His face flushed red, his voice a roar. Have you lost your mind? You've just ruined your career and possibly this restaurant. Do you even know who Adrian Whitlock is? His company owns this very tower. He could shut us down with a single nod. Lena stood frozen, breath ragged. I only wanted to help. I saw the messages. They're deceiving him. They plan to take his money. Shut up. Marco slammed the desk, making the water glass tremble violently. I don't care what you saw, what you think. Your job is not to judge. Your job is to serve. To stay silent. And you've wrecked everything. You're fired. Do you understand? Fired immediately. The words, though she had half expected them, still stabbed her like knives. Her head buzzed, vision blurred. Her body felt drained, leaving only emptiness. Pack your things. Your pay will be mailed. If you're still here another minute, I'll call security to drag you out. Marco spoke slowly, deliberately, as if hammering nails with each syllable. Lena stumbled out, legs shaking as if she were walking on thin ice. The staff locker room was eerily silent. No one said a word as she unpinned her apron, folded it, and slipped it into her bag. Their averted gazes, their silence weighed heavier than any reproach. She hadn't just lost a job, she had become an outcast. As she opened her locker, something fell out. The leather billfold from Adrian's table, which Marco had shoved into her hands in haste before dragging her away. Lena's hands trembled as she opened it. The numbers stood clear, over $1,000 for dinner. The tip line blank, a neat zero. But just beneath, scribbled hastily in small, slanted handwriting, were two words, "Good catch." Lena froze. It wasn't mockery. Not exactly thanks either. It felt like a signal, a code, a message from a world she never thought she'd step into. But as she walked out of the restaurant, the night wind whipped her face, icy, her tears streaming freely. Those two words were not enough to erase the fear. She had lost her job. She still owed tuition, her mother's medical bills, the rent. Everything pressed down on her heavier than ever. And in that darkness, Lena had no idea that her seemingly reckless, hopeless act would open a completely different door for her life. A door that, the next morning, would knock on her apartment in the form of a mysterious black box. That night, Lena left Willis Tower like a condemned prisoner. The city still glowed, yellow lights casting long reflections onto damp streets after a brief rain, but for her, everything seemed extinguished. Her worn-down heels soaked through, her steps heavy as if weighed with lead. She walked through the familiar streets of the Loop, crossed the old wooden bridge over the Chicago River where the flickering lights rippled on the water, then boarded the train toward Pilsen. The narrow, rattling car smelled of rusted metal. The wheels screeched harshly, but Lena didn't notice. She sat curled up, knees to chest, eyes vacant. In her head, only one sentence echoed, "You're fired." When she opened the door to her tiny loft, the familiar musty smell and the squeak of old floorboards greeted her. The battered wooden table in the middle of the room was buried in bills. Overdue rent stamped in red, tuition notices from school, debt collection letters from the hospital. Lena dropped her bag on the floor and slumped into a chair. Her eyes fell on the last paper, the remaining amount needed to carve her mother's headstone. Tears spilled over. That night she didn't sleep. She lay on the squeaky spring bed, staring up at the yellowed ceiling, listening to the wail of ambulances outside and the soft patter of rain against the window. Her tears soaked the pillow silently. In her darkest thoughts she wondered, was I right? Or just a fool who destroyed her own life? Morning in Chicago was gray. Fine mist blurred the small window, cloaking the room in dull color. Lena sat at her old laptop, eyes swollen, scrolling through job sites. Listings popped up, fine dining servers wanted, experience required, like cruel jokes. She clicked on a few, but deep down knew the truth. Word of last night would spread fast. The high-end dining world was closed off. A single phone call could shut every door. She set her hands on the keyboard, then let them fall, her gaze drifting blankly to the pile of debt. In her mind, two hastily scribbled words resurfaced. Good catch. She didn't know if it was sarcasm, acknowledgement, or just another power game. But one fact was clear: gratitude didn't pay bills, and it wouldn't keep this apartment. Suddenly, a knock at the door. Firm, decisive. Not the light tap of a neighbor borrowing an extension cord, nor the hurried rattle of a delivery man. This knock carried certainty, command. Lena startled, heart racing. For a moment she feared it was the landlord demanding rent. She wiped her tears quickly, dragged herself to the door, and pressed an eye to the peephole. Outside stood a tall man, posture straight, wearing a pinstripe gray suit, neatly knotted tie, leather shoes polished so bright the dim yellow hall light gleamed off them. His face was stern, hair slicked back, a nearly invisible earpiece tucked at his ear. He looked like a bodyguard, an agent, or an executive who had wandered into the wrong hallway. Lena hesitated for a few seconds, then cracked the door. "Can I help you?" Her voice rasped from a sleepless night. The man nodded slightly, his tone crisp, cold, and final. "You are Lena Tran?" "Yes, that's me. I am Arthur Chen. I have something to deliver directly to you." From my employer, Lena frowned. "Your employer?" I didn't order anything." He gave no further explanation. From his sleeve, he produced a matte black box the size of a shoebox. No logo, no label, simple, refined, intimidating. He held it out, his eyes never leaving hers. "My only duty is to place this in your hands and ensure you receive it." For a moment, Lena didn't move. A flash of dread crossed her mind. A cruel prank, a bomb, something worse. But Arthur's expression was too composed, too professional, as if this was nothing more than routine. She reached out. The box was heavier than she expected, cool, its surface so smooth it nearly slid from her grasp. "It's From who? Arthur dipped his head, his voice unchanged. My employer prefers silence as the answer. Then he turned, his polished shoes gliding across the worn floor without a sound. In seconds he disappeared down the stairwell, leaving Lena frozen, the box in her hands. Her small apartment suddenly felt cramped, suffocating. Lena set the box on the table and sat staring at it like it was a living thing. She didn't dare touch it, her heart pounding hard. Outside, drizzle veiled the city in mist. Time crawled, each second stretching into a minute. At last, curiosity outweighed fear. She lifted the lid. Inside, cushioned in smooth black foam, lay two objects. A brand new black phone, flawless and gleaming, though the screen was dark. And beside it, something that made her breath stop. A heavy, cold titanium card, her name engraved clearly, Lena Tran. At the corner, the American Express logo. Her throat tightened. She'd heard the rumors. Centurion, the black card, a thing of legend. Reserved only for those so wealthy the world bowed before them. And now it was in her hand, bearing her name. Beneath the foam rested a white card, thick and simple, the lettering refined. The 0 on the tip line was just for cover. Your courage is priceless. I will not let the truth you spoke become your punishment. This card is yours. Consider your debts gone. But this is not just a gift. It is an invitation. A far greater game awaits. If you wish to step inside, use the phone in this box. Do not communicate by any other means. Discretion is the only condition. A.W. Lena sat frozen. Her fingers trembled as she traced the weight of the card, felt its cold reality. This couldn't be a joke. Too precise, too meticulous, too real. She set it down, rushed to her laptop. The tuition website glared in red. She entered the card's number, hit pay. The screen spun. She held her breath. Then payment successful. Balance 0. A gasp burst from her lips, like waking from a nightmare. Tears blurred her vision, a smile trembling on her face. The crushing weight she'd carried, tuition, hospital bills, rent gone in minutes. She broke down crying, but this time not bitter tears, tears of release mixed with fear. Because she understood the true price of this card hadn't yet begun. The phone in the box lit up. The screen showed only a black emblem, a silver kite. She tapped it. A message appeared, just a few words. Lesson 1 begins now. Sloan is at the Chanel store on Oak Street. Do not confront. Only observe, buy something. Let them see you. Then report back. Lena dropped the phone onto the table, collapsing into the chair. Her heart pounded again. This was no dream. She was being pulled into a new game where every step might bring danger. Yet inside her rose a strange sensation, exhilaration, anticipation, as if for the first time in her life she wasn't just a shadow. Outside the window, the rain stopped, a pale slit of light breaking through the gray sky. Lena inhaled deeply, stood, and went to the closet. She pulled out her only black dress, simple, bought from a second-hand shop. She looked in her cracked mirror. The eyes were still those of a poor waitress, but in her hand now lay a black card and an open door. She knew from this moment forward her life would never be the same again. Oak Street at noon lay drenched in the gray light of Chicago's sky, the city's most luxurious street stretching like a silver thread plated with glass. Each boutique here was a temple. Prada, Gucci, Hermes, and Chanel, its black and white awning bold, the thick glass doors like a giant mirror reflecting the outside world. People stepped inside not only to shop, but to declare they belonged to another class. A black Mercedes slid to a stop at the entrance. The driver said nothing, only opened the door for Lena, bowing slightly like it was a ritual. She drew in a deep breath. The plain black dress clung to her slender figure, her worn shoes still betraying their scuffs, but in her hand, the titanium card weighed like a challenge. The glass doors opened. Inside was a different atmosphere, cool, faintly scented with leather, French perfume, and fresh tweed. Everything was refined enough to make her feel like an intruder. On dark wooden shelves, handbags stood in rows, gleaming like treasure. Every staff member was perfectly dressed, their postures straight, their practiced smiles flawless. "Bonjour, madame. Welcome to Chanel." A tall associate with neatly tied hair approached. Her eyes flicked over Lena's second-hand dress, polite but edged with judgment. "How may I help you today?" "Just browsing," Lena murmured, forcing calm into her voice. But as she stepped further in, she saw them immediately. At the center of the store, beneath white spotlights from the ceiling, Sloane stood before a three-way mirror. Draped over her arm was a classic flap bag, blazing red, its golden chain glittering in the light. She laughed brightly, her voice as crisp as shattered crystal, lifting the bag, tilting to admire herself. Beside her stood the man from the photograph, Julian. He wore a white shirt, arms loaded with shopping bags from other brands, his face radiating arrogant confidence. And the way his hand rested lightly on Sloane's back, too intimate, too natural, was a confession without disguise. Lena turned away quickly, her heart racing. She moved toward a display of sunglasses, pretending to choose a pair, using the glass surface as a mirror. The reflection was clear. Sloane laughing, her voice lower now, slipping into Lena's ears like needles. "He felt so guilty, Jules," Sloane giggled, running her hand over the strap. "Kept pushing me to shop as compensation for last night's little drama. I hadn't even cried for real, and he was already begging forgiveness." Julian smirked, his tone laced with mockery. "He's a good man. But good only means a fat target. Don't soften." Sloane narrowed her eyes, lips curving. "Soften? Don't joke. You think I'm here for love? This is a plan. And it's almost over. As soon as he signs the transfer for the Children's Art Fund, we vanish within 48 hours. "Bali, Kauai, anywhere you like, Zurich ready?" Julian asked, lowering his voice. "The framework's solid. Once the money flows, we're gone. One Monet, and we'll turn it into our passport," Sloane replied, her eyes glittering like someone about to seize treasure. Lena's pulse hammered. She could barely believe what she was hearing. This wasn't just deceiving a man. It was an international con tens of millions of dollars, a priceless painting, a fake charity as cover. She steadied her breath, set the sunglasses down, and drifted to the coats. Her fingers brushed a navy tweed jacket, soft beneath her skin, its stitching immaculate. She pulled it out, slipped it on. In the mirror's white light, she froze. For one fleeting second, she wasn't a poor waitress anymore. The jacket transformed her confident, refined belonging. The sales associate approached, eyes lighting up when Lena produced her card. Centurion, the black card. Instantly, the woman's gaze shifted from skepticism to reverence. She bowed slightly, voice airy as silk. "An excellent choice, madame. This jacket is from our newest collection." Lena placed the card on the counter. The moment titanium touched glass, the air itself seemed to change. The associate accepted it with both hands, reverent as though holding a relic. Julian's eyes flicked, curiosity flashing. He didn't recognize her. In Echelon's black uniform, she had been a shadow. But now, in tweed with a black card, she was a mystery. The receipt was signed. The jacket folded neatly into a white Chanel bag. a camellia pinned to the handle like a seal. Lena held the bag and walked past Sloane and Julian. In that moment, she deliberately glanced at Julian just 1 second, then turned away. No smile, no nod, but enough to plant a question in his mind. Who is she? As the Chanel doors closed behind her, Lena's heart thundered. She quickened her steps toward the car, clutching the bag. In her mind, the words replayed endlessly. Monet, Children's Fund, 48 hours. She pulled out the black phone, opened the silver kite app. Her trembling fingers typed, "At Chanel, Sloane with Julian, not a brother, an accomplice." Overheard, "Fake Children's Fund, Monet painting." They planned to vanish in 48 hours. The ticks turned blue instantly. A minute later, a reply appeared. "Excellent. As expected, Arabella Dorsey doesn't exist. That name is a mask. Dig deeper, find the mistake in the past. I'll provide resources. The real game begins." Lena's fingers trembled. On her face, fear and resolve mixed like merging colors. She glanced through the car window at Oak Street, glittering with lights, luxury brands, indifferent faces. She understood she was no longer outside. She had stepped in, and the road ahead, a road of traps, lies, danger, had no way back. The car rolled forward, leaving Oak Street behind. In her bag, the titanium card weighed heavily. In her head, her mother's voice echoed, "Sometimes silence is worse than lies." Lena whispered softly, "Mama, I won't stay silent." After the night rain, Chicago's streets gleamed wet, stretching out like smeared streaks of light. Lena sat in her tiny loft, the old laptop flickering weakly before her. Beside her, the Chanel bag rested on a chair, the navy tweed jacket still carrying the scent of new fabric, a strange proof that she had just walked out of a world she had never dared to dream of before. Yet now that very proof only reminded her she could never go back to being an ordinary waitress again. A door had opened, and beyond it lay a maze. The black phone on the table buzzed softly. A new message appeared, cold and concise. "Start digging. Arabella Dorsey does not exist. She must have a real identity. Find the mistake in the past. All resources are at your disposal. Use them." Lena stared at the words, eyes wide. All resources. She barely had time to imagine what that meant when her laptop chimed with a new email. The sender address was hidden, encrypted. Inside was a bank account, the balance so enormous it made her chest tighten. A staggering number, enough that even 1% could change her life forever. But this wasn't money for shopping or paying off debts. It had another purpose: investigation. She hesitated. A museum studies student who had never hired a detective, never worked with hackers, was now being asked to dig up the past of an international con artist. The thought was absurd, terrifying. Yet when she remembered her mother's eyes, remembered Sloane's fake smile in Chanel's mirror, Lena knew she couldn't retreat. She began searching. The screen glowed, casting a blue haze over her tired face. Arabella Dorsey. No official record. No birth certificate. No academic background. No trace in residency databases. The name was too clean, too perfect, unnaturally so. But who was she really? After 3 hours combing through public records, Lena leaned back, eyes burning. She exhaled and glanced at the phone. If Adrian's words were true, she could hire anyone. That thought opened another door. She typed a short message. "I need a hacker. A skilled group. I don't know how to approach this." Within 10 minutes, a file arrived. 3 names, contact details hidden behind encryption. Lena sat up straight, heart racing. This was no game anymore. This was reality. She was assembling her own intelligence unit. She chose the top name, a boutique group in New York, notorious in the underground tech world. She sent a brief email. I need to find someone. Attached is a photo. Multiple possible identities. Focus on Europe. Art circles and advance payment transferred instantly. The figure made her hands shake as she pressed send. The next 3 days passed like a whirlwind. Her cramped loft turned into a command center. Walls plastered with sticky notes, maps, printed screenshots. Stacks of documents piled on her desk. Auction histories, old news clippings, artist interviews. Lena worked with the concentration of an art researcher, except this time, instead of tracing the provenance of a painting, she was tracing the origin of a human being. On the 4th day, the hackers replied. Subject line, found something. Lena opened it, her heart pounding. A blurry photograph from a Geneva newspaper in 2018. Staff of a small gallery called Dubois Gallery lined up for a picture. In the back row, 2 familiar faces. A young woman with chestnut hair, her smile almost identical to Sloane's. Beside her, a young man with his arm around her waist, eyes smug. The caption, Cécile Dubois and Marco Bianchi. Lena froze. Cécile Dubois. Not Arabella, not Sloane. She had once been the daughter of Jean-Pierre Dubois, gallery owner. The article explained, after the sudden death of Jean-Pierre, his daughter Cécile took over. Within 6 months, the gallery collapsed, assets vanished, and the new owner disappeared. Police concluded mismanagement. Lena covered her mouth. The past laid bare. She wasn't a philanthropic entrepreneur. She was a betrayer, one who had gutted her own father's legacy. And the man beside her, Marco, now calling himself Julian, was her accomplice. They had done it once, and now they were repeating it, only with new scenery, new names. She immediately opened the phone, typed, confirmed. Arabella is Cécile Dubois. Julian is Marco Bianchi. They bankrupted her father's gallery in Geneva in 2018, disappeared with the assets. Now repeating in Chicago, the reply came faster than she expected. Jean-Pierre was my friend. He once boasted of his daughter Cécile. I can't believe it. Thank you. This is the evidence I need. Prepare. 3 days from now, gala at the Frick Collection. The final act. Lena lowered the phone, her whole body trembling. She had pulled back the curtain on a tragedy. From betrayal of family to international fraud, she had just handed Adrian a weapon powerful enough to destroy Sloane, or rather Cécile, before the world's most powerful eyes. She collapsed into her chair, torn between pride and terror. Who could have imagined that an invisible waitress would become the crucial link in a high society war? Outside the window, the city buzzed with car horns, red and green lights flashing on wet streets. But for Lena, the world had shifted. She was no longer a bystander. She was in the eye of the storm. The night of the gala arrived like a storm held at bay. The Frick Collection in New York glowed beneath chandeliers and floodlights, every column and archway polished until they gleamed. Limousines lined up before the grand entrance, spilling out men in tuxedos and women in gowns that glittered like stars torn from the sky. Security was discreet, but tight men in dark suits stood at every corner, eyes sharp, their earpieces glinting. For Lena, this world felt unreal. She had boarded the private jet like someone stepping into another planet. Her black dress had been replaced by a gown Adrian's team had prepared, silk the color of midnight, simple yet perfect, cut to flow with her every movement. The Chanel bag hung on her arm, no longer just a purchase but a signal of belonging. And in her hand, the titanium card remained heavy as ever, a constant reminder of the game she now played. When the car door opened, camera flashes cut the air like lightning. Reporters lined the barricades, shouting names, chasing images. Lena lowered her head, stepping out with careful grace. She wasn't the center of their lenses, not yet. But she felt the weight of every glance, the hum of whispers. Who is she? Where did she come from? Inside, the atmosphere was even more suffocating. Every step echoed on marble floors. The air smelled of roses and old paintings, as if history itself had been perfumed. Waiters glided silently, silver trays balanced with champagne flutes. In the great hall, masterpieces gazed down from gilded frames, silent witnesses to the theater about to unfold. Adrian stood at the center, dressed in a perfectly cut black tuxedo. His silver hair gleamed under the lights. Calm, composed, eyes sharp as steel. To everyone else, he was a pillar of power, the untouchable billionaire. But Lena, from where she stood, knew something deeper. Tonight he was also a man carrying a wound, a betrayal carved into his trust. And then came Cecile Sloan, Arabella, whatever name she chose. She swept in on Julian's arm, her navy gown clinging like liquid, diamonds cascading down her neck. Her smile was flawless, every gesture effortless. To the crowd, she was elegance incarnate, the fiancée of Adrian Whitlock, a storybook ending of wealth and romance. They didn't see the blade hidden behind her smile. Julian played his part well. He moved with practiced ease, laughing at the right moments, shaking hands, his charm smooth as oil. But Lena, watching from the crowd, saw the small things, his eyes scanning exits, the subtle nods exchanged with strangers in tailored suits. They weren't here for art or charity. They were here to close the trap. The orchestra swelled, violins lacing through the air. Glasses clinked. A voice announced from the stage, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Whitlock Foundation Gala in support of the Children's Art Fund." Applause erupted. Lena's heart clenched. Children's Art Fund, the very name of the con. She pressed her clutch tighter, feeling the black phone vibrate within. She pulled it out discreetly, shielding the glow beneath the folds of her dress. A message: stay near the West Wing. There will be a reveal. Watch carefully. When the signal comes, be ready. Her palms were damp. She slipped the phone away, moving toward the West Wing hall where Monet's water lilies hung, borrowed from a private collection for the event. The painting shimmered under soft light, its strokes of lavender and green alive, water lilies floating on endless ripples. To Lena, it wasn't just art, it was evidence. Cecile and Julian drew closer, their voices low. Lena pretended to study the painting, but her ears caught every word. "After tonight, it's done," Julian whispered. "The transfers route to Zurich are primed. Once Whitlock signs, we disappear." Cecile's lips curved. "He'll sign. His guilt makes him predictable. By tomorrow, the world will see me as Mrs. Whitlock, and by the day after, I'll be gone." Lena's chest tightened. Her instincts screamed to act, to shout, to expose them right there. But she held herself still, remembering Adrian's words. Discretion is the only condition. Suddenly, the lights dimmed slightly. A hush fell over the crowd as Adrian stepped onto the stage. His figure commanded silence. His voice was steady, measured. "Thank you all for joining tonight. The Children's Art Fund is a cause close to my heart. It promises to nurture creativity, to give underprivileged children the tools to dream. And like every dream, it requires trust." He paused, his gaze sweeping the hall, then settling for the briefest moment on Lena. Her breath caught. This was the signal. Adrian lifted a small remote. The screen behind him flickered. Instead of the foundation's logo, images appeared, photographs of Cecile in Geneva, headlines about the Dubois Gallery's collapse, legal documents citing missing assets. Then the blurry newspaper photo of Cecile and Marco side by side, smiling with their stolen legacy. The hall erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shouts. Cecile's face froze, her flawless mask cracking. Julian swore under his breath, his hand reaching instinctively for hers, pulling her back. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. This is the truth. The woman you know as Arabella Dorsey is Cecile Dubois, who defrauded her own father's gallery. And she, with her accomplice, intended to repeat that crime here under the guise of charity. All eyes turned. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. Cecile's face contorted, but she recovered fast, her voice rising like a whip. Lies! Fabrications! How dare you! But her words drowned beneath the sound of security moving in. Men in dark suits closed around her and Julian. They struggled, but it was useless. The trap had sprung. Lena stood frozen, her heart pounding, watching the woman she had once served at a table now caged in front of the world. For the first time, Cecile's eyes locked on her, not with charm, not with contempt, but with naked fury. A fury that promised this isn't over. And in that moment, Lena realized tonight was not the end. It was only the beginning of a far larger war. The gala had shattered into chaos. Guests whispered frantically, cell phones lifted like weapons, recording every angle of Cecile's downfall. Flashbulbs strobed, their harsh light exposing every crack in the facade she had so carefully built. Yet beneath the noise, beneath the shuffle of security, Lena felt an eerie stillness, like the moment after lightning when the thunder hasn't struck yet. Cecile's voice pierced the room again, shrill, desperate. You don't know what you're doing! This is a setup! Adrian, you're making a mistake. You'll regret humiliating me. But Adrian remained calm, standing tall under the spotlight, his silver hair gleaming like a crown of steel. The only mistake, he said, voice cutting through the din, was ever trusting you. Gasps rippled. Cecile lunged as though to break free, but the guards held her firm. Julian tried to twist away, his eyes darting toward the exit, but another line of security blocked his path. His charm, his confidence gone. He looked like a cornered animal. Reporters shouted questions over one another. Mr. Whitlock, how long have you known? Is this the end of your engagement? Will charges be pressed? Adrian raised a hand, silencing the room with a gesture that carried decades of authority. The evidence has been handed to federal investigators. Tonight was not merely about betrayal of a man, but an attempted theft of millions from children who deserve hope, not lies. Justice will handle the rest. Applause burst forth, not from everyone, but enough. Donors, patrons, even rivals clapped, some out of relief, others out of admiration. The tide had turned, but Cecile's eyes sought out Lena across the hall. Their gazes collided. For a split second, time froze. In those eyes, Lena read fury, contempt, but also recognition. You did this. You, the invisible girl, brought me down. Cecile's lips curled into a cold, venomous smile, as if promising, this isn't the last time you'll see me. Lena shivered, her fingers tightened around her clutch. She wanted to look away, but she didn't. Instead, she held Cecile's stare, steady, unyielding. It was the first time in her life she had faced someone powerful without shrinking. Moments later, Cecile and Julian were escorted out, their protests swallowed by the roar of voices. The great doors closed, leaving behind an echo of chaos. Slowly, conversation returned, cautious at first, then growing louder until the gala resumed its rhythm changed, but not ended. Adrian stepped down from the stage. Every guest who passed bowed slightly, whispered reassurances, offered handshakes of solidarity. But he ignored them, his eyes fixed ahead. And for one fragile second, Lena thought he might walk right past her, that her role was done and she would fade again into the background. Instead, he stopped before her, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, sharp and clean like cedar. His gaze met hers, not the cold, distant look of a billionaire, but something warmer, deeper. "You were right," he said quietly. "From the beginning." Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to reply, but words failed. All she managed was a small nod. Adrian's expression softened, though only slightly. "Courage is rare. You paid the price for it once. You won't pay it again. Not while I can stop it." He pressed something into her hand, a card white embossed with his personal crest. "Tomorrow meet me at my office. There's more to this than one con, and I believe you may be the only one who can see what others overlook." Before Lena could respond, he moved on, swallowed again by a circle of admirers and donors. She stood rooted, staring at the card. The room around her sparkled, champagne glasses, chandeliers, priceless art, but none of it touched her. Her world had shifted. She had walked into the gala as a shadow, and now she was leaving as something else entirely. Outside, New York hummed with sirens, traffic, and neon lights. The city never stopped moving. And in the back of a waiting car, Lena clutched Adrian's card against her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt seen, yet deep inside, one truth gnawed at her: Cecile's eyes. That venomous smile. This victory was only a battle. The war had just begun. Morning came with a restless sky. Clouds hung low over Manhattan, heavy and gray, as if the city itself knew storms were gathering. Lena stood outside the Whitlock Tower, a monolith of glass and steel that loomed over Park Avenue like a modern fortress. The revolving doors reflected her small figure back at her, a young woman in a plain coat clutching a borrowed umbrella, her breath fogging in the cold. She felt like an imposter about to walk into Olympus. Security inside was nothing like Echelon's quiet refinement. Here, it was sharp, military. Guards in dark suits checked badges, scanners hummed, cameras followed every movement. Lena swallowed hard, handed over the white card Adrian had pressed into her palm at the gala. The guard's eyes widened slightly. Then, without a word, he gestured her through. No badge, no questions. Just silent acknowledgement: "You are expected." The elevator shot upward, floors blurring past in silence. Lena's reflection in the mirrored walls looked pale, her hands clutching her bag tightly. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world, a vast office of glass walls, the entire city spread beneath like a living map. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled not with decorative spines, but with volumes worn from use law, economics, art, history. Behind a massive desk stood Adrian, his posture straight, his gaze locked on the skyline as though he could bend the city itself to his will. He turned when she entered. "You came." Lena nodded, her throat dry. "I wasn't sure if I should." "You should," Adrian said simply. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." She did, clutching the edge of the seat. Adrian studied her for a moment, his gray eyes calm but piercing. Then he placed a thick folder on the desk and pushed it toward her. Cecile Dubois was only a symptom. The real disease runs deeper. I need someone who can see what others miss. Lena hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, bank transfers, webs of numbers and names that connected across continents. Charities with beautiful names masking stolen funds. Artworks donated, then quietly disappeared. Offshore accounts under layers of shell companies. And at the center of more than one thread, Cecile and Julian. Her breath caught. This is global. Yes, Adrian said. His tone was controlled, but there was an edge of steel beneath it. And they are not alone. Cecile was reckless, too vain to cover her tracks. But others are smarter, more patient. If left unchecked, they'll consume institutions, families, entire cities. I've seen it before. I won't watch it happen again. Lena closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. Why me? I'm not a detective. I'm not anyone. Adrian leaned forward. For the first time, his voice softened, though it still carried weight. You're not blinded by wealth. You don't see what people want you to see, you see what they hide. You proved that. At Echelon, at Chanel, at the gala. My people are skilled, but they are trained to look for patterns they expect. You, Lena, you notice the cracks in the paint. His words struck her like a bell. She thought of her life at Echelon, of reading guests' smallest gestures, of noticing truths others ignored. What she once believed was just survival had it become her weapon. Adrian stood, walking to the window. The city's towers gleamed through the mist, steel and glass stretching to the horizon. If you choose to step away now, you'll live quietly. I'll ensure your debts are gone, your record clean. You can vanish. He turned, eyes narrowing slightly. But if you choose to stay, the game will only grow darker, more dangerous. You may be hunted, betrayed. You may lose more than you already have. This path offers no guarantees. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Lena stared at the folder, at the black web of lies binding names she'd never known, and she thought of her mother silent, broken under betrayal. She thought of Cecile's smile, venomous and unrepentant, and she thought of her own trembling voice at Echelon, the night she chose truth over silence. She lifted her chin, her voice quiet but steady. If I walk away, someone else will suffer. Someone who doesn't even know they're being deceived. I won't be silent again. Adrian's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. For a man whose face was carved from granite, it was like watching ice crack. He gave a single nod. Then we begin. At that moment, the black phone in Lena's bag buzzed. She pulled it out, the silver kite symbol glowing again. A message flashed across the screen. Zurich. 2 days. They'll try to move early. Watch the airport. Adrian's gaze dropped to the phone, then back to Lena. Your lesson continues. Pack light. You're flying with me. The decision was made. Lena's world, once no larger than a cramped loft in Pilsen, was now stretching across oceans, into shadows she had never imagined. She slipped the folder into her bag, her pulse hammering. The storm outside had not yet broken, but she could feel it in her bones. It was coming. And this time she wouldn't be running from it. She would be walking straight into its heart. Victory in New York over the forged Monet spread faster than Lena imagined. International art journals began whispering about the Langley Art Integrity Foundation as a new force in protecting culture. Some articles even mentioned her name, Lena Tran, a young director from humble beginnings with eyes that pierce through forgery. But praise brought suspicion. On the 58th floor's polished hallways, Lena started to notice the stares, the murmurs just as she passed. Melissa, Adrian's trusted assistant, was polite as ever, yet her eyes grew colder. "You're very fortunate," she said one morning, voice smooth, smile thin. "Not everyone earns Mr. Whitlock's confidence so quickly." Others smiled stiffly, whispers trailing after Lena like shadows. One word surfaced again and again: favoritism. Lena understood. To them, she was an intruder, Adrian's gamble, and one successful case was not enough to erase their doubt. They were waiting for her to stumble. That chance arrived sooner than expected. A gray, rain-slick morning in Chicago, Adrian summoned her to his office. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, his profile stern against the mist rising from Lake Michigan. "Lena," he began, voice low and deliberate, "we've just received urgent word. A lot of paintings is heading to auction in Hong Kong Degas Renoir. But according to a European museum source, at least 2 pieces are almost certainly fakes. Extremely sophisticated copies. And this is no longer isolated. I fear we're facing a global forgery network." The words tightened something inside her chest. From Monet in Manhattan to a whole shipment bound for Asia, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't a single scam. It was a machine. Adrian turned, gray eyes unflinching. "I want you to go. Alone. Not only to spot the forgeries, but to gather proof. We can't simply accuse. We need to expose the system itself." Lena froze. "Alone?" He nodded. "I'll back you from here. But you must stand in that room. This is your trial by fire. If you succeed, the Foundation and the doubters will have no choice but to believe in you." Her pulse thundered. She thought of Melissa's frosty gaze, of whispers in the corridors. She realized this trip wasn't just about the paintings. It was about her place in the Foundation. Hong Kong blazed neon, streets crisscrossed with glowing signs, the air thick with salt, incense, and exhaust. Lena stepped out of a taxi, clutching a worn leather bag that held only her black phone, a notebook, and a few encrypted files. Ahead rose the auction house, a tower of glass, its lobby glowing like a stage. Men in tuxedos and women draped in silk glided inside, their laughter echoing like bells. Lena slipped into the crowd unnoticed. To them, she was no one, an anonymous figure in a plain dress. But anonymity was her shield. Inside, the preview exhibition glittered. Paintings lined the walls, each bathed in spotlights, each guarded by glass and velvet ropes. Lena drifted from piece to piece until her eyes caught on a Degas. Ballerinas in rehearsal, their white tutus soft in the dim studio light. Gorgeous, convincing. But as she leaned closer, she saw it, paint laid too thin in the corner, a chemical sheen impossible for the 19th century. Her notebook trembled as she wrote. Next, a Renoir. Gentle faces, dreamy brushstrokes. Yet something felt wrong. The eyes were hollow, too calculated. Renoir painted emotion. This canvas reeked of imitation. She stepped back, heart pounding. 2 forgeries side by side. But as she turned, her breath caught. Across the room, she saw her. Melissa. Adrian's assistant stood among a group of foreign men, her black dress elegant, her face calm. But her eyes flicked toward Lena sharp, assessing. In that instant, Lena's blood ran cold. Why was she here? She hadn't been mentioned in the mission. Lena forced herself to move, pretending to study the catalog. Yet every nerve screamed. Melissa's gaze lingered, then slid away, unreadable. That night, Lena locked herself in her hotel room. She laid the photographs on the bed, details of the Degas, the Renoir. She zoomed in, compared, analyzed. Layer by layer, the truth emerged. The same hand had touched both works. The same workshop. A network with branches reaching across oceans. She typed furiously, sending her findings through the encrypted phone. Minutes later, Adrian's reply arrived slower than usual. Clipped. Well done. But be careful. Not everyone inside the foundation stands with us. The words sliced deeper than any accusation. Lena stared at the glowing screen, her stomach hollow. If Melissa was part of this, if betrayal came from within, then she wasn't just chasing forgeries. She was walking a tightrope over an abyss. That night, sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of her mother, sitting at their old kitchen table, tired but gentle. "You mustn't stay silent," her mother said, "but remember, truth has enemies too." Lena woke gasping, sweat dampening her sheets, the city's neon bleeding through the curtains. She pressed her hands to her eyes. The hunt for fakes was no longer just about art. It was about survival, and she knew there was no turning back. Morning in Hong Kong was still veiled in mist when the message came. Adrian's words were short, like a blade pressed to her chest. "Return to Chicago immediately. We need to speak face to face. Bring every piece of evidence." Lena's breath caught. Just hours earlier, she had uncovered something darker than the forged canvases themselves. The official authentication papers for the Hong Kong lot bore Melissa's signature. Not an accident, a shield. Proof that corruption wasn't just outside, it had crept into the very heart of the foundation. The flight back across the Pacific stretched like a tunnel through shadow. Lena sat rigid, staring at the glowing map of the route, her mind an endless reel of questions. Did Adrian already know? Was Melissa acting alone or as part of something larger? Why summon her now? The silence of the cabin pressed in like a verdict waiting to be spoken. Chicago met her with cold steel skies, wind slicing off Lake Michigan. A black car idled at the curb, driver stone-faced. No words were exchanged as the city blurred past the window, towers looming gray and solemn. When the elevator opened onto the 58th floor, Lena felt her pulse in her throat. Adrian was waiting. Behind his oak desk, he looked carved from granite, silver hair catching the dim light. Melissa stood nearby, calm, lips curved in the faintest smile. The air between them was taut, as if a wire hummed invisible through the room. "Lena," Adrian said, voice measured, "you did well in Hong Kong, but I need to hear it from your own mouth. Who, in your judgment, let those forgeries slip through?" The silence was suffocating. Lena's hands trembled, but her gaze stayed steady. The authentication carried Melissa's signature. The room froze. Melissa gave a soft laugh like silk tearing. "A waitress from Pilsen dares to accuse me." That signature was procedural, delegated. She doesn't understand the process. Her eyes glittered with disdain. She mistakes paperwork for conspiracy. Adrian didn't look at Melissa. He only studied Lena. "Do you have proof?" Lena pulled a folder from her bag. Photographs of brushstrokes, pigment analysis, metadata from leaked emails. She spread them on the desk, each page another nail in the coffin. It's not an oversight. It's coordination. These paintings came from the same workshop that forged the Monet. Without inside protection, they could never have passed inspection. Melissa's composure cracked, just for an instant, a flicker of unease. Who will believe her? She snapped, her tone sharp now. She's nothing. A child pulled off the street, handed a title she didn't earn. Adrian, think. The board will laugh if you take her word over mine. Lena turned to Adrian, voice trembling but clear. Whether the board laughs or not doesn't change the truth. If the foundation builds itself on false signatures, it's just another laundering scheme in disguise. You created this to protect art, to protect trust. If betrayal sits beside you, everything collapses. The silence stretched until Lena thought she would suffocate. Then Adrian rose slowly, walking to the window. He stood with his back to them, shoulders rigid, the city sprawling beyond in silver haze. The seconds dragged, each one pounding in Lena's ears. When he turned, his eyes were colder than steel. "Melissa, I entrusted you with more than responsibility. I gave you my confidence. And now I see that trust was the forgery." Melissa paled. "Adrian, enough!" His command cut like glass. He flicked his hand, and two security officers entered, silent and swift, as if they'd been waiting. Melissa struggled, words spilling fast, but her heels struck the marble floor like the tolling of a bell. The door slammed shut behind her. The office was quiet again. Adrian looked back at Lena. For the first time, the weight in his eyes lifted. "You've done what my entire council of experts could not. You revealed the rot inside our own walls. Lena, from this moment forward, the foundation is no longer mine. It is ours." Her knees weakened, and she sank into the chair. Tears burned her eyes, not of fear this time, but release. She thought of that first night at Echelon, when she lost everything for a single truth. Now truth had brought her here, to power, to purpose. Adrian stepped closer, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "You once told me your mother was betrayed, that you would never let silence do the same to others. Now you have the authority to make sure of it. The foundation will stand as a fortress against lies because of you." Her voice shook, but her words were firm. "I promise. No one will be forced into silence again." 1 year later, the Langley Art Integrity Foundation had become a global sentinel. From London to Sao Paulo, forgery rings crumbled, auction houses tightened standards, and museums turned to Lena's team before unveiling masterpieces. Journalists called her the invisible girl who became art's guardian. On the 58th floor, Lena stood by the glass wall, Chicago glowing beneath her. Her beige suit fit like armor, her hair swept neatly back. Gone was the timid waitress who bent under trays and debts. Now her name was spoken in boardrooms and conferences, her presence a warning to counterfeiters worldwide. Adrian entered quietly, silver hair softer now, his smile warmer. "You've turned the impossible into reality," he said. Lena turned, a faint smile touching her lips. Not alone. With everyone who believes in truth. They stood side by side, two figures from different worlds bound by one cause. Beyond the glass, Chicago shimmered. Lena closed her eyes briefly, hearing her mother's voice. "Don't be silent," she whispered back. "I kept my word, me." I chose the truth 2 years later. An autumn afternoon bathed Chicago in golden light. On Lena's desk lay a small envelope, an invitation embossed in silver. Echelon 75th Anniversary Gala. That evening, she returned to the place where it all began. The chandeliers still glimmered, the crystal still caught the light, but the room felt smaller now. Former colleagues greeted her with disbelief and awe. Marco, the manager who once dragged her out in shame, was long gone. The restaurant, scarred but standing, sought redemption. A young waitress stumbled, spilling glasses with trembling hands. Lena bent to help, whispering softly, "Don't be afraid. Just focus on what's real right in front of you." The girl's eyes brightened, steadied. Lena sat at a corner table, gazing out at the city lights. She remembered the weight of a silver tray, the terror of speaking truth, the night that split her life in two. And now, director, guardian, survivor, she had come full circle. Her story was no longer about survival. It was about legacy. Lena's journey closed not with applause, but with the quiet strength of a promise kept. From a nameless server who dared to speak a single truth, she was thrust into the storm of lies and power, and proved that courage could unlock doors thought forever closed. The cost was real loss, fear, isolation, but her resolve carried her from the shadows of doubt to the light of a life defined by integrity. The lesson is simple yet enduring. One honest choice can alter an entire destiny. Truth may be fragile, a flickering flame, but even the smallest flame can illuminate a room drowned in darkness. And for Lena, that one act of courage not only saved a man from deceit, it redefined her life. No longer silent, she lived to defend what was right.